Hello friends, we'll now go through accounting standard 2 and as similar way of AS1 I have prepared summary notes for that, and as and when I go through the standard I will explain you with some examples including live scenarios where I have gone through, and then we'll try to solve some problems in AS2 as well. So AS2 is basically talks about the valuation of inventory. So basically, you need to know what are the scope exclusions first, what is not getting covered in AS2. We need to be very clear with that. And then we need to really understand the basic definition of the term inventory. What is inventory, right? And how are we going to value inventory? Basically, it's cost or the net realizable value. So what is cost? When I say cost, you have material, you have labor, you have overheads, you have variable overheads, you have fixed overheads. How are you going to include those costs? And you have admin overheads, you have selling overheads, you have so much of expenses. Are we going to consider all these expenses into the inventory valuation, or are we going to segregate and say we are not going to consider certain expenses and we'll include only certain expenses? That bifurcation is important because not all expenses you incur gets into the inventory valuation. There are a few expenses which gets included, but there are quite a lot of other expenses which gets excluded also. You need to be very clear with that. And regarding overheads, how do you value fixed overheads? Right? If you incur fixed overheads, what portion that will get absorbed into the inventory valuation? You need to be very clear with that. If you have a joint product and a byproduct scenario, how are you going to value that in that scenario, right? So we are going to look at all those things in AS2. And what are the various methods which are prescribed by the standard? We have so many methods like FIFO, we have weighted average. So what is the prescription by the standard? And there is one particular method which is not recommended by the standard at all. What is that method? We are going to look at that. Then how are you going to value raw materials, right? So if you have, and that has got a direct correlation with finished goods. So all these aspects we are going to look in AS2. So I'll be sharing the screen right now. Right. Now let's understand the scope exclusions first. What is not getting covered in AS2? Number one, the work in progress arising from construction contracts, because we have a separate standard AS7 to deal with that. Work in progress arising in the ordinary course of business of service providers. Shares, debentures, other financial instruments held as stock in trade. Basically, these are current investments, right? And they are getting covered under AS13. Similarly, producers' inventories of livestock, agricultural and forest products, and mineral, oil, ores, and gases, to the extent they are measured at NRV in accordance with the well-established practices in those industries. So this is important. Actually, in Indian accounting standards, Ind AS, we have a separate standard to handle this livestock and agriculture. So the whole logic is very simple. If you have a separate standard to deal with these areas, you need not bring them into AS2. Deal them in those separate places. Let's understand what is inventory. Inventory is basically an asset which is held for sale in the ordinary course of business, right? Which is in the process of production for such sale, or in the form of materials or supplies to be consumed in the production process or in the rendering of services. So basically, I can say this is finished goods or work in progress and raw materials. What is finished goods? You can trade, you can buy and you can sell finished goods. That is the first one. They are held for sale in the ordinary course of business. You can buy a finished goods and you can sell that finished good. So if you're going to hold them, that is the finished goods part. What is in the process of production, which is nothing but the work in progress, right? If you are in the manufacturing space and anything which is in the process of production for such sale, that is the work in progress. That is also forming part of inventory. And third one, if you have a raw material of or any supplies which will be consumed in the production process, then that is also called as inventory. So inventory has three portions. One is finished goods, other is WIP, and third one is raw material. Right? If you understand these three key words, that is suffice. So what is inventory? It includes, these are assets, and if I break them, you have got three components within that. One is One is finished goods, second is work in progress, and third one is raw material. Hope it's clear. Right. Now they are very clear. What is not included in inventory? When I talk about spare parts, servicing equipment, standby equipments, right? Now, by and large, spare parts will be a part of AS2. But if you find that a spare part or a servicing equipment or a standby equipment by nature, right, if it can be used in relation to a property, plant and equipment, you have a separate standard called AS10 to handle those areas. So in that event, they say that you need not classify those spare parts, servicing equipments and standby equipment within AS2. You can as well bring it under AS10. Otherwise, if this is a very generic spare part, you bring them under AS2. If you have a very specific spare part which can be related or which can be utilized in relation to a property, plant and equipment, they say that you please categorize that under AS10. You need not bring it up under AS2. Right? So you can say general spare parts that will come in AS2. But if you have a spare part or a servicing equipment which can be utilized in relation to a property, plant and equipment, that will come under AS10. All right. Right. The next important aspect is how are you going to measure the inventory? We measure inventory basically at cost or NRV, whichever is lower. Cost or NRV, whichever is lower. What is NRV? Net realizable value. Cost or the net realizable value, whichever is lower. That is the basic funda. Now we are going to dig deeper as to what is cost and what is NRV. So let's look at cost first. What is cost? Cost has got three components. One is cost of purchase, cost of conversion, and other cost. There are three components of cost. What is cost of purchase, cost of conversion, and other cost. Now, what is cost of purchase? When I say cost of purchase, when you buy or when you purchase something, you have a basic price, your basic price, but that will not stop there, right? It will include some duties and other taxes as well, right? Because you need to pay some customs duty, all those things, right? So that invariably becomes part of the cost. It's not just the basic price of the material which you buy, but it's also the incidental duties and taxes which you pay, like or any freight expenses which you incur to bring the asset into its or the inventory into its present condition and location out to the factory. That should be a part of the inventory, right? That is a cost of purchase, right? So that's the first part. The cost of purchase consists of the purchase price. That's the basic price plus duties and taxes other than those subsequently recoverable by the enterprise from the other taxing authorities. For example, if you get a GST credit, right? So you will recover those subsequently from the government. So you ensure that you don't include that part as part of the cost of purchase. That's important. For example, duty drawback. When you pay customs duty and when you export the same item, there is a possibility of getting a duty drawback. So you please ensure that that part of the duty which is getting drawn back, you don't include that as part of the cost of purchase. So it's either a GST credit or a duty drawback. For that example, that portion of the duties and taxes will not form part of the cost of the product. Then freight inwards, yeah, and other expenditure directly attributable to the acquisition. All these areas will form part of the cost of purchase. But the standard is very clear. Trade discount, rebate, duty drawbacks, and other similar items are detected in determining the cost of purchase. I told you this, right? So the duty drawback, same thing, like trade discounts or duty drawbacks or rebates and other similar items, you need to subtract it, you need to reduce it in determining the cost of purchase. That is important. What is trade discount? That is the volume discount. A rebate is nothing but a discount. Drawback, duty drawback is the one which you actually draw back from the government. The next is cost of conversion. First was cost of purchase. Next is cost of conversion. What is cost of conversion? Because you got the material, you purchase the material. Now you're going to apply some labor and other overheads on that, right? You're going to process it, right? So there is a conversion cost which is getting involved. What is that? The cost of conversion of inventories includes the cost directly related to the unit of production, such as direct labor. So you engage people to work on the product. So there is a direct wages or a direct labor element which will get part of the conversion cost. So direct labor will be part of the conversion cost. Then it also includes a systematic allocation of fixed and variable overheads that are incurred in converting the materials into finished goods. So it's not just the direct labor. We are going to incur a lot of other overheads as well, like fixed and variable overheads, right, to convert the materials into finished goods. So all these things put together will be a part of the cost of conversion, right? So basically it's cost of purchase, cost of conversion, and other cost. Cost of purchase we just now saw, and cost of conversion, it includes what? Direct labor, and then a fair share of or a systematic allocation of fixed and variable production overheads, right, which will be incurred in converting the materials into the finished goods. That's important. Now, little tricky one. Direct labor and variable overheads are quite simple because they vary in lines with the production. For example, if you produce 1 unit and the cost is 2 rupees per unit, you just multiply. If you multiply 2 units, it becomes 4, right? It varies in relation to the production. But what about fixed overheads? It is based on normal capacity. So you have a challenge there. So I'm just giving you an example here, how to allocate fixed production overheads. It's based on normal capacity. Now I'll give an example here. For example, if the normal capacity is 100,000 units and the fixed production overhead you incur is 18 lakhs. So by default, the recovery per unit is going to be 18 rupees. The fixed overheads recovered as per the normal capacity is going to be 18 rupees. How? It's 18 lakhs by 1 lakh. Now I'll give you 3 scenarios. If the actual production is 1 lakh units, which is nothing but your normal capacity. Your capacity is 1 lakh units, and you have achieved, or you are currently operating in that 1 lakh unit. Obviously, you can recover at 18 rupees, which is 18 lakhs. So 1 lakh units, if you make the recovery at 18 per unit, you will recover 18 lakhs. But please understand, if the actual production falls short of the normal capacity, your capacity is to operate at 1 lakh units, but if you actually produce only 90,000 units. Now, if you do the recovery at 18, it is at 90,000 into 18, you will land up 16 lakh 20,000. You will be able to absorb 16 lakh 20,000, but you have incurred 18 lakhs. The fixed production overhead is 18 lakhs, whereas since your production is slightly lower than the normal, you are not able to absorb the entire 18 lakhs. You will be able to recover only 16 lakh 20,000. And the balance 1 lakh 80,000, which is the under-absorbed overheads, should be charged to the costing P&L account because you have incurred 1 lakh 18 lakhs. There's no second thought on that. You're spending 18 lakhs. You have incurred 18 lakhs. But out of the 18 lakhs, 16 lakh 20,000 is getting into the inventory, and the balance under-absorbed overhead of 1 lakh 80,000, that will be charged to P&L. Right? But look at the third case. If you're going to operate more than the normal capacity, if 1 lakh units is the normal capacity and you're operating at 1 lakh 20,000 units, if you absorb at 18 rupees, you will end up at 21 lakh 60,000. How? It's 1 lakh 20,000 into 18. Please take a calculator and please do the calculation. You will get 1 lakh 20,000 units into 18. You will land up at 21 lakh 60,000. It's not possible because you have spent only 18 lakhs. You can't absorb 21 lakh 60,000 into the inventory. So you can at best absorb 18 lakhs, which means if I produce, since my production is more, my recovery rate per unit will fall down from 18 to 15. So if I recover at the rate of 15 rupees, which is 1 lakh 20,000 into 15, I would be recovering the 18 lakhs. So this example is very important. 3 scenarios, right, where first scenario, first case, my actual production was in line with the normal capacity. So I recovered at the base rate of 18. Second case, my actual production was less than the normal capacity. Even in that case, I was recovering at 18, but it resulted in an under-absorbed overhead, which I am transferring to P&L. The third case is I am operating above the capacity, I am producing more, but in that case, I will not be able to absorb more than 18 lakhs. My recovery per unit will be 15 rupees per unit, thereby 1,20,000 into 15, I would be able to absorb the entire 18 lakhs into the inventory. This is very, 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 very important. Please make a note of this example. Okay. Now, having got clarity on this fixed overheads, let's understand how are you going to allocate the cost of conversion for joint products and for byproducts. So if you have a joint product and if you have a byproduct, what is joint product? There is an input of a raw material which you do, right? And using the same material, we are going to produce two products. Let's assume it is joint product A and joint product B. But the input is the same. Output is going to be two products, product A, product B, but the input is the same for both A and B. If that be the case, how are we going to allocate the joint cost between the two products? There has to be some rational and consistent and systematic basis on which we can actually segregate this. That's the standard says. When the cost of conversion of each product are not separately identifiable, well and good. If you can easily find out this portion of the cost, this is for product A and this is for product B, you go with that method. But in a case where you feel that the cost is not separately identifiable, then you have to make an allocation between the products on some rational and systematic basis and consistent basis. Right? What could be the basis? Probably you can identify the split off point, and whatever is the sale value at the split off point, you can actually segregate that on that ratio. You can segregate the total cost or the conversion cost between A and B on the base of the sale value at the split off point. This could be one basis. Right. Now, what happens if you have a byproduct? What is byproduct? Byproduct is something which you are not planned for. You are producing a product, but there is an incidental or ancillary product which is called a byproduct which is coming out. For example, you get some oil, right? Oil has got some kind of a value. It may not have a value, but just a scrap value. It's a byproduct. You didn't actually plan for it. It is a resultant of a main product, right? You planned for the main product, but there is a resultant byproduct as well. Now, this by and large, these byproducts will have a very insignificant value. So if you find a market for this byproduct, you will have a net realizable value for this byproduct. You please reduce it from the cost of the main product. That is the standard sales. Net realizable value of the byproduct is deducted from the cost of the main product. This is the recommendation of the standard. Right. Now, the standard says there are some costs, right, which needs to be included, and there are some costs which you should not include. Right. What they say, included only to the extent that they are incurred in bringing the inventories to their present condition and location. So this is a very generic statement. Whatever expenses or whatever costs which you incur, if you feel that they are necessary to bring the asset or bring the inventory to the present condition and location, you please include it as part of the cost. It's a very, very general statement, because the first one was cost of purchase, second was cost of conversion, the third one is other costs. These are residuary or ancillary costs. So apart from cost of purchase and apart from cost of conversion, there could be so many other costs which you incur to bring the inventory into the present condition and location. So if you feel that they are important, then you please include that as part of your cost of inventory. Okay. Now, what they say, there is a question. So what about interest and other borrowing costs? Suppose if I take a loan or a borrowing and I need to pay interest, can I include it as part of the AS2? Now, generally, the general thought process of the standard is that interest and other borrowing costs are usually considered as not relating to bringing the inventory to their present condition and location, and therefore they are usually not included in the cost of inventory. So they are very, very, very specific about that. So interest and borrowing costs, you are not supposed to bring it as part of cost of inventory, which is the recommendation of the standard as well. What are the various exclusions from the cost of inventory? There are 4 items which they feel that, which the standard feels that you should not include, you should just exclude it. What are those? Abnormal amounts of wasted material, labor, and other production costs. Logical. If you, for example, if you have set a standard of consumption, for example, if the material consumption for this product, let's say it is 15 kgs, and you went and consumed 25 kgs, the balance 10 kgs, which is over and above the standard, that's abnormal, right? So you can't include that as part of inventory, because if you do that, what will happen, right? You will be concealing that fact. People will not know. You will be enhancing the cost of consumption. Rather, you need to bring that into light by treating it as an abnormal item and debit the P&L, and you need to fix responsibility on those people who were responsible for that excessive consumption. So anything, any wasted material, any labor, for example, 3 hours is a production time. You people work for 4 hours. They are totally inefficient in that aspect. So if that be the case, it's very important that we need to bring to light all those abnormal amounts of material, labor, and overheads, right? So that should not form part of the cost of the inventory. That is important. Then storage costs. Storage costs, unless those costs are necessary in the production process prior to a further production stage. By and large, storage costs, you forget it. You need not include as part of inventory. However, if you feel that if there are process 1, process 2, process 3, the product moves from process 1 to process 2, and then from process 2 to process 3. In this transition, it takes time, right? From process 1 to process 2, it takes time. From process 2 to process, it takes time. So you need to store that goods and incur some storage costs before it moves to the next process. In that event, the storage cost becomes relevant. Otherwise, general storage cost is not relevant for the inventory valuation. Same thing, administrative overheads that do not contribute to bringing the inventories to their present condition and location. And last one, selling and distribution cost. You should not include as part of the cost of the inventory. I hope it's very clear. What are the various methods which are prescribed by the standard for inventory valuation? Number 1 is the specific identification method. Number 2 is the FIFO, first in, first out. Number 3 is the weighted average cost method. Number 4 is the standard cost method. And number 5 is the retail method, right? LIFO, last in, first out method, it is not recognized as per AS2. Let's be very clear with that, right? So LIFO method is not recognized by AS2. There are only 5 methods, which is the specific method, FIFO, weighted average, standard cost, and retail method. What is specific method? For example, if you buy an inventory, let's take at 10 rupees per unit, that lot price is rupees 10, right? And if you're going to make an issue into the production from that lot, if you can very clearly identify that, yes, I have issued materials from this specific lot, if you're able to specifically identify the issue of materials to production, then well and good. That's the best method. For example, if you have 3 lots, one at 10, other at 10.5, and other at 11, you got 3 lots at 10, 10.5, and 11. Now, if you're going to issue materials, and if you're very sure, okay, this material I have issued from 10 rupees lot, this material I've issued from 10.5 rupees lot, this material I've issued from 11 rupees lot, then that is called the specific identification method. But do we think it's possible? Every case is not possible. That's why we have other methods like FIFO, first in, first out, which case you may issue the material in whatever pattern, right? You may issue the material from a 10 rupees lot, or a 10.5 rupees lot, or a 11 rupee lot. For example, today you purchase 10 rupee lot, tomorrow 10.5, and day after tomorrow 11 rupees lot. But the actual issue could have been routed from the 11 rupees lot. But you do the accounting based on FIFO, first in, first out. You take a assumption that the items which were acquired first, right, that will be consumed first. That is the FIFO method. But in reality, in practical, it it is the 11 rupee lot which gets issued. But we are not going to get into that process of specific identification because it's very difficult and time consuming. So what we take a stand that we will follow the first in first out method of valuing inventory, though in practical, though physically the goods may move in any direction. People, you may issue the stock from the 11 rupee lot and then from the 10.5 rupee lot and then the 10 rupee lot, but you will go with the assumption that 10 rupee lot is the first lot. So I'm assuming that only those units are getting consumed first. That is a FIFO method, right? One is the weighted average cost method. What is weighted average? Quantity. So the quantity into the price, and you try to arrive at a weighted average price. So the issue of materials into the production will be based on the weighted average price. That is important. Standard cost method in many big companies, the standard cost is set on a monthly basis, and these standard costs are reviewed on a monthly basis and signed off by the manager, right? And last one is retail method. Retail method is something which is very applicable in departmental stores where you have a large number of fast moving items. It is not possible to follow the specific method or the FIFO method or any other method. So because you have so much of items to deal with, to take stock of inventory in real time, it's very difficult. So what they do, they know what is the selling price of the product, and the industry per se has got a gross margin percentage. For this industry has got a 20% margin or a 25% margin based on experience, right? Now what we do from the sales, if I reduce the gross margin, will I not get the cost? So that's a very simple way of arriving at the cost. So if you go to those kind of industries and if you start applying FIFO method of valuation, you will run mad. Please don't do that. So you need to be really proactive. That's the reason so many alternatives are given to you. You need to choose which method would be appropriate for which industry. So if you're getting into a retail market, then it's important that you follow the retail method of inventory valuation. So from the sales, if I reduce the gross margin percentage, that is going to be give the cost, because at the end of the day we are going to value the inventory. We are trying to find the cost of the inventory, and these are several methods by which we can actually find the cost of the inventory. And FIFO method is not logical, and that's the reason it is not recognized as per AS2. Okay. The next important point is, what is NRV? If you take a step back, we said cost or NRV, whichever is lower. And all this foregoing discussions we had, it was on cost of purchase, cost of conversion, other costs, all those things. Main product, byproduct, joint product, right? And now we are getting into what is NRV, net realizable value. The net realizable value is the estimated selling price in the ordinary course of business less the estimated cost of completion and the estimated cost necessary to make the sale. It's all estimated. So, for example, you are halfway through, or let's take 70% through with the manufacture of a product. You want to find the NRV of the product. So, if the production is already 70% done, which means you need to incur more 30% cost. So, what is the estimated cost of completing the product? Right? You have to incur this 30% cost also, and that is going to be an estimated selling price in the market. There is a market price for that as well. To sell the product in the market, you have to incur some expenses like brokerage, commission, whatever cost. So from the estimated selling price, if I reduce, right, the estimated cost which is necessary to make the sale, and from that if I reduce the cost of completion, the 30% cost, that gives my NRV. That is very important. Okay. Now, very important, inventories are usually written down to NRV on an item by item basis, though grouping of similar items or related items is permitted. This is a very common question in the exam, right? I think 2 or 3 times they've asked this question. For example, you've got 3 items, A, B, C, right? You've got 3 items, A, B, C. All these 3 are unrelated. A, B, C are 3 different items which are unrelated, right? Now, very important thing, you cannot group the cost of A plus B plus C, right? And you cannot group the cost of the NRV of A plus B plus C and then do a verification and then do a calculation there. No. You need to go item by item. Let's take for A, the cost is, this is the cost, this is the NRV, whichever is lower, that is the final cost. Then you come for B, item B, this is the cost, this is the NRV, whichever is lower. Then you come for item C, this is the cost, this is the NRV, whichever is lower. You can't add up the cost of A plus B plus C. You cannot add up the NRV of A plus B plus C and then do a holistic comparison. Never do that. You can do that only for items which can be grouped. If the items are very similar in nature, if they are highly related, then you can group what is the cost of A plus B plus C. What is the NRV of A plus B plus C? You can group and then you can do on a holistic basis. But if the items are not similar, if they are not related, you have no choice. You have to go item by item only. Let's take item A. What is the cost? What is the NRV? Find the lower of the two. For item B, what is the cost? What is the NRV? What's the lower of the two? Item C, what is the cost? What is the NRV? What is the lower of the two? You need to go on that basis than a holistic basis. Right. The last bit of the story is very interesting. How do you value materials and other supplies? Because when I value finished goods, right, one component of the finished goods is raw material, right? Raw material gets into the finished product, right? So the valuation of the raw material, it depends on how I value my finished goods. That is very important, right? You cannot, so when I say cost or NRV, whichever is lower, you don't go by that logic for raw material. That is the logic for finished goods. So whatever, so thumb rule, if you want to find out how to value a raw material or any other supply, you please go to the finished product of which the raw material is a part, right? You please find out how that finished product is getting valued. Use the same basis for valuing the raw material also. It's very simple. I'll give an example. Look at this. Situation 1, 4 columns are given. Particulars, cost, NRV, treatment. Situation 1, finished good is X, raw material is A, which means the raw material A is used in the manufacture of the finished goods X. Now, cost is 175, NRV is 200. Now, we want to know what is the valuation for raw material A. They have given you two numbers. For X, you have 175 and 200, and for A, you have 190. Now, if you take only A per se, forget X, you will say, okay, cost of A is 100, NRV is 90, whichever is lower, I will take at 90. That is the logic. If you go with the logic, it's wrong. The reason is it is raw material. You need to look at the finished product of which this raw material is a part. Look at finished goods X. Cost is 175, NRV is 200. So cost or NRV, whichever is lower. So obviously 175 is lower. So finished goods X is valued at cost. So X is to be valued at 175. So the principle which I am adopting for valuing my finished goods X is what? At cost 175. If that be the case, you need to value the raw material A at cost itself. You cannot value at NRV of 90. Because why? The reason is the finished goods of which this raw material is a part, that finished good is getting valued at cost. So it is important that you adopt the same methodology for the raw material also. Take situation 2, 175 and 160. My finished goods, now it's getting valued at NRV of 160. Straightforward, then you need to value your raw material at 90 rupees only, which is the replacement cost. Look at that, 175, 160, then 100 and 90. So it's very important that you value the raw material at NRV, which is nothing but the replacement cost. Right? Why? The reason is the finished goods of which the A is a part of that. The finished goods is getting valued at NRV. So you need to adopt the same methodology for the raw material also. So the last one is the disclosure part of AS2, very important. What we need to disclose as part of AS2, the accounting policy adopted in measuring inventory, including the cost formula. So which method you actually followed? Are you following the specific method, or the FIFO method, or the weighted average method, or the retail method? Which method are we following? Please tell that. And what is the total carrying amount of inventory and its classification appropriate to the enterprise? These two items you need to clearly specify in the financial statements. I hope it's very clear. This marks the end of AS2.